This is Jeremy Renta.
And this is Amy Solara.
And you have discovered Mantra and Magic,
a podcast where Eastern philosophy meets Western magical practice. Hi.
Oh, hey.
So for everybody who wasn't on the phone call with us just now, we were talking about the summit that I did this past weekend. And one of the things that came out of it is the idea of integration. And we touched on it a little bit in the panel on Sunday with Andy Murphy and Bree Bird. But Jer and I have talked a lot about integration and what that means, what it looks like, how it's different for everybody, and kind of what that process is. And we learned it through plant medicine primarily. Like, wouldn't you say? Did you start doing, I didn't start actively using that word and engaging in the practice until plant medicine ceremony.
Yeah, I mean, that was the first time I'd really heard it. And I had done therapy before and that type of thing, like going through divorce and that type of stuff. And none of the therapists that I worked with ever really used the term. It felt like more of a, because it is such a huge experience, like being there for a full weekend, or even like the first time I only sat for one night. It's like, it's such a life altering experience that you literally do have. And I'm trying to get better at, call me out if you hear me say literally now. I'm trying to go through and remove words from my lexicon, go back and listen to some of our old podcasts. I was like,
you're getting better at your
say that way too much. Yeah. The process, you know, I also expected when I went and sat the first time that it was going to be it was going to become a pattern of me going back and sitting, but I thought it could be a one and done, because I'd heard of so many people going and sitting and having such a huge shift after their first experience, that it was like, yeah, my life changed, and then, you know, I kind of went into whatever else. And it was, I'm still integrating stuff. Like this past week was, I cleared a lot of stuff from the last time I sat, which was in Peru 2 years ago. Like I had a lot of stuff that came up that was like, it was hiding underneath a lot of the things that I was dealing with family darkness, a lot of like family demons that I have kind of felt have been affecting men. I want to say the paternal line on my mom's side and on my dad's side for a long time, that was literally finally kind of started to clear. And I talked about it before too, about doing some work for my uncle, like clearing work for my uncle, and he passed, you know, in 2016 or 17. So having those types of things that have been that come up, and like being okay with having to sit with the process, you know, because it doesn't all happen at once, and things don't integrate necessarily quickly a lot of the times. I never understood that with people who, like, you know, I've been going to my therapist for 5 or 6 years. Like, what the fuck? Why are you paying them? You're obviously you're not getting anything out of it. And that's definitely the case when whether it's plant medicine or anything. Like the time that it takes for stuff to integrate, you know, there's not a time limit on it. You can't put a timetable on it, because since this is an energetic thing, and since this can go back multiple lives or throughout your family's lineage, because, you know, you have your own past lives which aren't connected to your current family, and then you have your family's bullshit that you have to deal with when you come in. You know, like there's so much stuff that you get affected by from being raised in a house full of pretty much children, because adults don't get an adult handbook. They just kind of like, we reenact the same damages that have happened to us because we can't integrate it. We don't know how to actually like process the thing through. So I think for us, again, and I think for a lot of people too, we've kind of talked about how people who can sit with a mushroom or sit with other plant medicines and have such a huge shift. Just like, yeah, you're going to have a huge shift, but like, how do you take the lesson that you've learned, or the things that start to come up for you, and how do you allow it to go down the funnel? How do you allow it to process and actually be integrated, like you said, into your routine or into just your healing, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's there's so many things that you said in there that I like want to touch on. One of them, just from the very beginning, when you were talking about like not wanting to repeat words, not wanting to say the same thing over and over again. That's something we talk a lot about in yoga teacher training. When we speak during class, we try to limit the amount of words used so that the words are more clearly understood and students are able to follow along in a better way where they're not lost in what the teacher's saying. And maybe you read a poem at the beginning or end or story or something, but during the class, instead of saying, now look back at your right foot, casually lift it up in the air and take a big stretch as you inhale, you just say, inhale, right leg high. So there's this like kind of paring down to the most necessary and fruitful words. And I think that's a huge part of integration that a lot of people also don't think about. We're pursuing so many things, we're interested in so many avenues, and we repeat things constantly. But when we're able to go back and review, then we start to develop the awareness. And then once we develop the awareness, then we get to develop the practice. And it's like at this point, I just caught one. I don't like to say like anymore unless I'm making an actual analogy. Rather than use it to describe something or use it to say that someone was speaking in a specific manner. So I'm trying to remove like, I'm trying to remove I'm trying to remove all of these unnecessary filler words that are indicators that I'm not thinking before I'm speaking. And it takes years, and that's what integration is. And that's something else that you said that I love. It takes time. As a society, we are not used to things taking time. Even just the concept of one and done on ceremony. What you said with the idea of you being able to go for one weekend and boom, being done for life. I have a feeling that for people who do experience that, it's because they really can't handle anymore. Their paradigm would just be too radically, insanely unintegratable. It would just be in a space of them not being able to move forward with life. They would be too shocked out of their present reality. Whereas someone who goes in for more, I think it's like one of two things. Caught the like again. So that's the awareness of like going back and being able to say, okay, I'm repeating this word because I'm trying to speak quickly. So I need to slow down. But when you and I were going back consistently, we were seeking not only truth, not only clarity, not only knowledge, not only all the good things, we were also seeking the bliss and the high and the experience of getting out of the world that we didn't enjoy anymore. And then we both very clearly got the message, you don't get to come back until you figured this shit out. And so that's something I really want to stress for people, that it doesn't even have to be plant medicine. It doesn't even have to be formal ceremony that maybe you or I or another practitioner is leading. It can just be a specific type of experience that you clearly get the message. You don't get to experience this again because you're using it as an escape. Therefore, you are not integrating the lessons. You're simply taking a break from life. And that's spiritual bypassing. And so you either get spiritual bypassing or you get integration. And it's a choice every time, but you have to be willing to put in a lot of hard work to not spiritually bypass.
Right. Well, I mean, we are novelty seeking creatures as human beings. It's like being able to go and have an experience like that where, I've said numerous times, like the first time that I sat in ceremony, it was everything that I thought it was going to be and more, just because hearing people to talk about it, like listening to Aubrey Marcus and other psychonauts who have discussed it and talking about the experience of like it being a life review, and you also having like the sacred geometry stuff that comes up for you, and having, being able to meet these energetic entities that may come into the space to work with you, or angels or whatever, whatever ends up kind of coming in, because it's also not the same depending on where you're sitting, what plant you're sitting with, where the plant was grown. Like see, now I just did it. Now I'm going to catch myself. the medicine that our shaman served at the place where we sat in Joshua Tree, it's Hawaiian. So the feeling is completely different from the medicine that comes from Peru, which is a lot more earthy, a lot more masculine, and has a much more grounded feel to it. It's the yellow, right? The yellow chacruna that they bring in from the where they grow it in Hawaii. Has a wave-like feel. It literally feels like you're in the ocean. Literally is another word that I want to remove from my lexicon. So keep an eye out for that one. Literally but it feels, you feel very held, and just like the ocean, it can feel like a tidal wave. It can feel like a tsunami. You know, it can feel like there's a hurricane going on, because you get super, super stirred up. And then you're washed up against the shore and you're like, oh, I think I'm feeling okay. I'm feeling a lot better. And then I know that there have been times when ceremony will end. And I will say that too, about where we have sat. The shaman and the people who are keeping the space, the guardians, are super mindful to make sure that everybody has kind of cleared what they need to clear. And that even if you still are going to journey a little bit more, you can step out of the space and go and kind of like talk about it if you need to, maybe eat a little something to kind of start kind of getting back in your body. But there have been times when I've sat before, and I'll go and I'll talk for, an hour and a half. And then suddenly out of nowhere, I'm like, I'm going to have to go back into the dome. I need to be in a safe space, and you go and you get back into it. And it's like, all right, well, I'm going to be here for another, 45 minutes, and you have more things that kind of come to you. So the way that stuff comes up too, I feel like, if you haven't had an experience like this before, and it also really depends, because there have been times when I've sat and I haven't had anything happen. A month would go by and I would go back and sit as a guardian again, take a smaller dose or maybe the same dose. And then it's like the blinds on the window, it's like somebody like yanks the blinds up and you're like, oh my God, it's just so incredibly bright that you can't take everything in. You literally flinch back. And there have been times when it's like the message is super quiet and super subtle, and it's kind of like, hey, you remember that thing you thought about last week? You were right. And it's like, whoa, seriously? Cool. This is great. That was so much easier. And then you barf and then you feel better, So it's interesting too, for me, that it's, and Aubrey Marcus had discussed this too, where he's like, he stepped out of plant medicine ceremonies where he was doing things like Aya, and then moved into just working with flower essences, working with rose petals or working with certain things. And that is incredibly powerful. I mentioned it last week or the week before last about using sage. I literally took sage, like flower essences of sage, once last week. And the stuff that cleared was old, like childhood trauma, like pre-verbal stuff that was coming up. And I'm like, I don't know where this has been. So that's another thing I think about integration, is being aware of the fact that once you start kind of hammering at the dirt, you might it's like going to be an avalanche, the stuff that may come out, you may not be prepared for, and you may not expect it.
I think that happens in yoga too.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to, we're talking about plant teachers today, but there can be so many other practices that bring up this type of release in order to see.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I like you mentioned the barfing. So with ayahuasca, if you've never sat in a plant medicine ceremony that uses a plant that's a purgative, right? You can sit in tons of plant medicine ceremonies that don't use purgative plants. Ayahuasca vine is a purgative, and it's mixed with the chacruna, which releases the DMT, the dimethyltryptamine, that allows for the visions to start dancing in front of your eyes and inside your head and outside of your head. But a lot of times that I have sat with Mama Aya, I don't start seeing a whole lot. I'll start feeling sensation in my body, but I won't start seeing visuals until the first purge.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be a vomit purge. It can be crying. It can be laughing. It can be shaking.
Sweating.
wedding.
Yeah.
It can come out in so many different ways. The body releases in so many different ways. And this is something people are starting to experience with Anton's primal flow style of yoga. There's intentional shaking that happens because people who've done trauma release energetic work know this. When you shake the body, when you physically shake the body, you are releasing so much stored trauma. And so that happens a lot in plant medicine ceremony. But now that people are doing it in yoga, they're like, why is all this coming up? Why am I being confronted with this? Why are my emotions going nuts? Like, I didn't expect to cry today. It's like, well, your body stores things. And this happens too, I'm sure, a lot for you with people on the table when you're doing massage therapy. They don't realize what's happening and they have to integrate the lesson that's coming up for them, and they might not know how. So when you have a client who maybe is confronted with past trauma or with maybe even some sort of ancestral lineage that they're holding, because I've heard of that before, where their back is repeatedly tense in a certain spot and it's not actually theirs, it's their father's or their mother's or their grandfather's. How do you help them pinpoint first the lesson and then the steps to take from that as a healer, as a practitioner?
Right. Well, I mean, having people on the table, one of the reasons that I love Lomi style of massage, which is more like full body sweeps. You know, you'll start at the when you first start, at least when I first start doing a session, you'll do like the standard back protocol, but then you do a lot of like full leg sweeps all the way up to the shoulder, and like there's a lot more of the body being able to completely allow the energy to move to other places so that it can clear. So they may have emotions that come up. I don't necessarily push verbal processing on the table, because I want people to be completely in it, and then allow their body to somatically deal with it. Like if they want to be able to discuss it, if they have something that comes up, I think that's fine. But I think that once you're starting to move your energy again to your head, if you're getting out of your body and you're trying to think and process, this thing came up and I want to like discuss it. It's like you're kind of out of the experience, and the energetic may not have been completely moved out of where it was. So if people do have stuff come up, usually I'll ask, even at the end of I'll call it a ceremony, because that's literally how I practice. At the end, and ask them if they did have anything that came up. For the most part, people aren't really ready to start discussing it, because my sessions are incredibly long. And I'm not a therapist. I'm a massage therapist, but I'm not a clinical therapist. So the whole ability to actually verbalize and kind of put it down, I want them to do on their own too. Like the integration, we kind of had that same experience with sitting in plant medicine. It's like, don't start talking about it. Don't start thinking about it. If it's there, you can write it down, journal. But like, if you start to kind of like try to put words to it, you may have false memories that you start to put on top of it, or like, somebody else may be talking about something and you were actually experiencing whatever they were dealing with. It might not even be yours. So allowing a client to be like, helping them to kind of get back embodied that's my goal, and it's the same thing with doing plant medicine ceremonies. It takes time. Like if you're going to go see a therapist, you're going to talk about your problems. It may take 4 or 5 years for you to get some stuff up and for you to understand it. And the same thing with body work. Like if you're just going in for physical relief, then go to Massage Envy. If you're actually wanting to process some stuff, and it's my massage practice is like my yoga practice. It is a part of my yoga practice. It's a lot of breath work. There's mantra, like all of these things are integrated just like everything in our life should be, So yeah, it was a long answer to a
No,
short
it's
question.
so beautiful. It's such a beautiful answer. This is something that I was working with the All Souls Coven School this week is every time you start to question what you're feeling, go back to just feeling. Try to get out of your head into your heart, into your gut, into your body. And I love that you're directing that as a facilitator. I think a lot of times I revert to the mental processes because that's my natural state of observation and wanting to observe the feelings as opposed to feel the feelings.
Right.
And so that's been a huge integration practice for me, because I used to either check out and push the feelings down, or I used to get like tidal waved by them where I couldn't function.
Right.
And I had to like just stop all communication with people. I didn't know how to process the feelings. So I think being able to fully sit with them so that they don't bottle up and then explode is huge. But also the idea of journaling as a tool that, even though it feels mental, is actually really, really good communication with oneself. Because if your goal is to just record the experience, you can go back later and it can help you reintroduce those thoughts, those images, and those feelings into your consciousness. Because a lot of times you think to yourself, or at least I do, I'm going to remember this. I'll remember all of this. This was amazing. How could I ever forget it? I don't even remember half of what happened during the time that I was giving birth. Like, so I feel like that was a huge tool in the beginning, was to be able, the minute that ceremony finished and I was lucid enough, I was present in my body and in my ability to see clearly and use my hands clearly. Once I was in a state where I was functioning on that level, I would grab my journal, and there's been so many times I've gone back to it and just read it and just been blown away by the relevance of that imagery to what I'm going through at the moment that I pick up the book again. Or to the ceremony that I just experienced that harkened completely back to that other one, and how it all connects. And so I don't want people to shy away from journaling for fear of being in their head. I actually want to encourage journaling because, one, you can free associate. You can literally just write the words that you're feeling, like sad, depressed, pissed, angry, whatever. And you're getting it all out. And you can also write joyful, grateful. You can just write the emotions and kind of see where you are that day. And you can record the entire experience. So you can say, well, I opened up sacred space, I called in the directions, I called in my guides, I started to do this yoga flow, I felt my breath shift, and suddenly I felt compelled to lay down on my mat and close my eyes, and I went straight from Shavasana to the Samadhi experience, and I was seeing geometric patterns like I had in plant medicine, and had no idea how I had gotten to that point. But I remember these specific guides were being called in, so perhaps if I follow the process again, I can get to this point again. And you can start to, at least I've used it to start to build on work so that I can repeat what's coming during the lesson and therefore integrate it better. Because instead of just getting it once, I can try and access it. And I think that's something too that a lot of people just keep going back to the plant ceremony because they want to get back to that same point and they don't know how. And part of integration is learning how to get to where the plants have taken you without the plants being physically present in your body in an active way, right? There's always going to be some residual neuron shift that the plant has activated.
Well, it's a patch, right? It's like it's going on, and you have like a computer patch. So it's like it's there. It just hasn't launched, or it's it's something that you're not experiencing, like you said, actively. Yeah.
So it's like learning how to click that file and open that file again without inserting the CD. I don't know if like kids these days know what that is, but I think it's that feeling where I remember the very first time that I experienced psilocybin, and it was done in a really beautiful way. It wasn't done in a very traditional ceremonial sacred way, but we had a bonfire. We were outside. There was no city around. We were in the woods, and I was just fully connected to the stars. And I've been trying to get back to that point of understanding the stars since, by studying astrology, by devoting my time to being able to go outside and notice when Venus is on the horizon at sunset versus sunrise, and really analyzing it in a way that I can remember, and hearkening back to the bits and pieces I have of that experience that the mushrooms were taking me on in terms of a journey through the stars that I wouldn't have ever seen as possible prior to their being introduced into my system. But since then, I know it's completely possible for me to get to that point. I just have to learn how.
Right. That's, I think, one of the reasons why pure research on psychedelics was it was definitely shut down at the end of the 60s in 1970 when they put the ban on pretty much anything.
Yeah.
But it's inconsistent, right? Like one of the other reasons that you do a fast beforehand, or you do you follow the dieta, is so that you're getting as much bullshit out of the way so that the plant can do its work without interacting with alcohol or without interacting with wheat or soy or cheese,
sugar.
Sugar. Yeah. Any of these other things that actually have a consciousness of their own, which may trigger part of the negative experience that you have when you're in a psychedelic state. I mean, people talk about having a bad trip, and it's like, if you're not it's like going on a road trip, literally. Like if you don't plan accordingly and you don't check the air in your tires, and you don't put gas or windshield wiper fluid in, and you get 200 miles outside of your house and your car breaks down, that is what you're doing if you go and you sit in a ceremony, or if you take mushrooms, or if you're doing anything with hopefully a more mindful bent, and you're not planning ahead, and you get there. And then I remember very vividly, I know we're going to get to the point where we start to kind of talk about some of the experiences that we've had in ceremony, but I remember very vividly having this experience once when I sat, where it was relatively early in the experience. You kind of go, I talked about this too with different people. I don't know if we've discussed it, but like, if you've planned accordingly, as you start to kind of drop into the space or ascend, however you want to see it, there's this, from my experience, there's like this bazaar of thoughts that you go through. And it's literally like walking through a bazaar in India, where you've got all of these different vendors trying to sell you ideas and different baubles. And it's like, check this out. Do you want to have this experience for the next 20 minutes? Yeah, cool. And then you kind of like, you're sorting through it. It's almost like getting through a satellite field above the earth. And I remember, having that experience, realizing that I needed to get out of the bazaar so that I could go and do my work, and having this, it was like the only way I could describe it is like a globe, like a world. And it was this sphere that was near me. It was a gold sphere. And as I started to get kind of close to it, like the gravity of it started to kind of pull me in, and my body started to react to the thing that was there. And it's like, that's not what I want to do. And I could see like on the thing that there were like chains and loops, like earring hoops, that type of thing. And I was kind of like, I don't want to be stuck to this thing for any amount of time. And I literally had to pull myself away from it to make sure that the gravity didn't pull me into the experience. And it was like going past the Death Star, as I'm like, all right, let's just keep on going. So I think part of that is maybe things that are in our field. Maybe some of that stuff is things that other people are dealing with. It may actually be stuff that is in the magnetic field of the earth, but some of it is actually stuff that's in our body. The whole idea of purging is to not get stuck to that thing, not get stuck to the energetic of like thoughts or memories that we have, and to not get stuck to certain foods or things that we've eaten, because there's karma inside of that stuff too, so whatever that is, that I didn't want to be bound to it, and then allowing myself to move past it and purge, because I remember purging shortly after that too. It's like, whatever this thing is, just kind of let it move through. So are you there? Oh, there you are.
Yeah, sorry, low power mode on the phone.
It's okay.
That's so interesting. That's so fascinating. I've never experienced that.
Really?
No. When I begin to experience the medicine's activation, I think is the best way to phrase it, within my system. When I start to feel the shift out of everyday reality and into altered spaces, right? I typically, the majority of the times, first feel the physical sensation. It's like a tingling that spreads everywhere, like my body's getting ready for something. And then this deep weighted heaviness of complete relaxation, where I have difficulty sitting up, I have difficulty keeping my eyes open, I have difficulty opening my mouth. And it's usually during the Mariris, when we're calling in the animals. Someone starts singing Mariri, Mariri, and my whole system just collapses. And there's a sense of having to get through a wall almost. And it's like, once I'm able to break through the wall of sensation and of complete and utter relaxation, then the purging usually starts. And then once the purging starts, I get into a space of what am I releasing? What are my intentions? And they always say this in ceremony: go back to your intentions, go back to your prayers, go back to your intentions, go back to your prayers, call on your guides, call on your guardians, call on your teachers, ask Mama Aya to show you. Eyes open, ears open, like very clear interaction with the energy as it's taking you in, or as it's taking me in. Sorry to make it my own story. And I would feel much more able to traverse that like little, I mean, we both experience like a before moment, which is fascinating, but it's entirely different, right? Mine's like this thick fog that it's a veil. It feels like I'm passing through a veil. And once I get through the veil and I release, then the release is usually whatever's left in my system that doesn't belong there. And the times that I have done the strongest dieta, I've had the most connected experiences, but I have not necessarily purged less, because my body was still clearing out toxins. It was still clearing out all of the insane things that we come into contact with as part of our everyday world, our everyday life right now. But my body was much more able to release its hold on my spirit consciousness and allow me to travel further when I did the dieta in a strict way. And there were only a handful of times, like less than 5 times, where I got through the veil part, I got through the purging part, and I got into the opening up to, okay, so what do you want me to see? And had this blast. Like, that's the only way I can describe it, where I was, every single time I was completely laying down, because it was the only way I could get my spine completely straight, because I would keep slouching if I was not. And I needed my spine completely in alignment. And I worked on clearing the chakras. And once those channels were open and the snakes were winding up, there would be this little boing, and just like crazy opening up of the third eye. And I remember each time it happened, it was like watching a tear in the space-time continuum. Like I was moving through some kind of wormhole, stargate, portal, and it would open up and I'd look through and they would be celebrating on the other side. Like, another human did it. Congratulations. Welcome to the party. What do you want to know today? And it was this insane array of beings, and they usually appeared to me as simultaneously individual and completely unified, where they had individual thoughts and expressions and even forms sometimes, but they were so connected to the rest of their race, species, whatever it was, that they could all unify at one point and look at me in the same way or from the same lens and be completely in communication with each other, to where I couldn't keep up to what they were saying, but I could hear like one laugh and then another one respond. And so they were both completely whole unto themselves and completely connected to each other. And I was like, oh, that's what I'm aspiring to. I'm aspiring to be so evolved as a being, an interdimensional being, that I can exist in that state. And the medicine showed me that I can actually contact them, that I can communicate with them, that I can directly see them, that I have the capability of rewiring my brain in order to be in that state in this lifetime, which is mind-boggling. And that I don't actually need Mama Aya to hold my hand to do it. And so the best experiences I had were when, like I said, I was in a very devotional, dedicated state of detoxing myself prior.
Right.
And I think that's what's pushed me into living a lifestyle of dieta rather than just engaging in dieta with ceremony. I mean, I'm doing ceremony every 2 weeks at least, and now every week because I've got the Coven School. So I basically have to stay in a constant state of dieta.
Right.
For me, in terms of the way that I feel comfortable as a facilitator, I wouldn't feel comfortable as a facilitator if I was engaging in a lot of the things that I used to think, oh, that's harmless. And now I remember there was one point where I was throwing up in her kitchen. It was after ceremony and we were all like there to eat, and we had all come out of the room that we were having ceremony in, and we were in the kitchen of the house, and I all of a sudden just was hit with this wave of sensation that was putting me back into plant ceremony state. And I threw up in the sink, and I looked at it and I thought to myself, that's sugar. All of that just came out of me was sugar and candida and the dysbiosis that is caused by it. And I could see the whole digestive system working to get rid of it because it was a poison in my body. And I did not fully integrate that lesson in the sense that I did not fully eradicate sugar from my diet until last year. And even then I was still little bits and moments where I felt like I needed to celebrate. And then I thought, oh, what is it that I have to celebrate this way?
Right.
Where celebration is still poisoning. And it's this continual lesson of, I used to have this pattern. Now that I've removed this external substance from my system, I can hear a whole lot better. I can see a whole lot better when it comes to things that are not in this dimensional reality, in this physical reality. And so I think that's partly integration too, is having the discipline to admit to yourself when you're still engaging in something just because it feels good, not because it's actually good.
Right. Yeah. I think part of that too is, again, we talked about being a materialist reductionist, saying that if things don't have a physical form, then they're not real. And part of what we're doing by putting more of that stuff in our body is building up more of that, more of the material, literally. It's like, the world is, or the universe is membranous. It's very membranous. Us to be able to like express emotion, or for us to be able to like send thoughts to other people. Like you've had that experience where you have like kind of a psychic connection with somebody, or someone that you really love, or an animal even, because animals don't have words. You can tell what's going on with them. And the more that we drink, the more that we eat, not to get on like a soapbox, but the more that we eat, the more that we drink, the less that we treat food like ceremony, the more of, like I said, the karmic baggage that we're putting into our system, the more that we're feeding yeast, which causes a biofilm that is literally a web, of things that are inside of our body, which keeps us from being able to express energetically in whatever way that it is. Your skin gets tight. You have sinus drainage. Like, this is another thing when it comes to clearing and ceremony too. Like, the way that stuff comes out is bizarre sometimes. Last week when I had this thing that came up, I cleared some stuff that had happened from Peru, and then I had this really deep memory of something that I had done and that had happened to me when I was a kid. And my tears were thicker, my mucus was thicker. Like, it's this stuff is coming out of your pores, coming out of your body. And two of our other shamans that we worked with, that did a lot of work with Iboga and the frog, that did a lot of clearing in that way for people who were dealing with heroin addiction and other types of addictions. They told me of experiences of having somebody who would come in and they may be microdosing, but they're doing the frog ceremony, and they would clear and it would be, when they purged, it would be kind of clear, and then it would be kind of yellow. And then when they come back and they'd clear again, it would be kind of green. And then they come back, I did it this in reverse. They started out where they would purge and it was like black. It's like, when you vomit something up, it's just like really, really dark. It was almost bloody, like your body's kind of purging it out. Then it would transition from that to almost like a bile color, to a green, and then to a yellow, and then to clear. So that what you're clearing out, it's just like, I'm not sure if it was Hippocrates, but some of the old Greeks who talked about doing flushes, you literally do a colonic until the water that's coming out of your body is clear. Like you're getting rid of everything so that the skin can be just the skin, and then you don't put more stuff on top of it for a while so that it can actually heal and you can clear out the skin that's in your digestive tract. So seems like it's the same thing there. It's just depending on which way it's moving, whether it's coming up or going down. And it's something else that's been interesting for me in the past couple of weeks. I've been more sensitive in my stomach. It's like I'm feeling places in my body that I haven't felt in a long time. And we all carry our pain, and we all carry our energetic baggage in different ways. Some people have jowls. Some people might have fat on their arms. Some people might have like love handles. Some people may just carry it in their hips. There are certain areas where the energy is not moving, and that stuff, we end up collecting sugar, we end up collecting fat and different things in those places, and those emotions don't move. So as I've been clearing more and more the past couple of weeks, I'm feeling my body again. And I'm remembering, when I was a kid, I actually could feel my body. There's places where you're not supposed to be numb. You're supposed to be able to pinch your love handle and feel it. It's not supposed to be like, like this mesh that we've got around our gut. So more and more of the massage therapists that I talk to in Denver as well are doing a lot of intestinal massage. They're learning how to do that type of thing to get, a lot of the nooks and crannies moving for people who do have, constipation issues, or who do eat a lot of their feelings. They just kind of are trying to put something on top of it. So yoga is a big part of that, doing a lot of twists where you're getting into your core and you're actually starting to kind of move some of that stuff out of the way. Being aware, as we've talked about with some of the mantras too, about what it is you might be holding in certain areas. Like this stuff is not just, it correlates to your liver for whatever the hell reason. There's stuff that might not be working properly. So if you're having trouble where, sugar's not being processed, or you're having trouble processing fat, then it may be, the organs that are related to that. And there's possibly something connected to that. So we as a society have a lot of sexual trauma.
Had so much associated with each of those organs. Like when you look at the way that the Egyptians mummified people, they specifically sought out these organs that were clearing centers and glandular centers, like the ones that had to do with the release of hormones and the distribution of hormones and the release of toxins from the body. Those are the ones that they really emphasized. And when you look at their placement for the chakras, it corresponds directly to pineal, thyroid, thymus. Like it goes all the way down, and it's kind of eerie how they had these systems. And I mean, anybody who believes in Atlantis knows that they already knew it, and that the Egyptians were just reviving something that was old information. But I was watching something today about it and just thought, like, yeah, there's a reason that we do certain yoga practices. Like you said, there's a reason that my chiropractor will do muscle testing and then say, okay, we need to shift your kidney, it's a little low. And dig his hands into my abdomen and like slide the fascia, because it's all connected. And we forget, like, oh, maybe I'm carrying it differently in this way because there's an energetic block or an energetic build up, and it can't function. And so we need to release it on this level. And we're lucky that we have the tools that we do that have been passed down to us when it comes to sound, when it comes to movement, when it comes to hands-on healing therapies, because not everybody has access to those. And that's something else that I didn't bring up as much as I would have liked this past weekend during the summit talk with Inner Alchemy Summit, but the you and I have talked a lot about before, and it's the idea that our culture believes that healthcare should be a fix, not a prevention.
Mm-hmm.
And that you go to the doctor when something's wrong and they treat the symptom, not the
And
cause.
that it's something that you have to fucking pay for. That drives me crazy.
Well, I'm up in the air about that because I still think everybody should be paid for their time regardless of whatever it is they're doing.
Well, yeah, but the fact that
we
you
live in a
have
system with money.
that we have to have health insurance, that you have to have a, you know, and you can't trust your own intuition to take care of yourself. That's the thing. It's like, you know, a lot
But
of like
I
all
feel
of
like
this,
we
all
wouldn't
of this
even have
journey.
to pay. Sorry to interrupt, but I feel
It's
like we
okay.
wouldn't have to pay if we had a prevention-based system.
I
If everybody had
agree.
wellness.
But there's also an education factor that's in there. You know, it's like what got me on this journey in the first place was I had health issues that I was not getting answers from the guy that I had to pay, you know, out of pocket to go see. You know, I had to make sure that I had insurance so that I could go and have them tell me to put cortisone on spots on my body. I'm like, I could buy this over the counter thing. That's, you know, that's not going to fix the problem. So doing research and, you know, that's part of the problem too, is like doing research on your own stuff and becoming your own doctor. You can become a hypochondriac. You can realize that maybe that's not the right answer, or you go down a path for, you know, 5 or 10 years, like I have in certain points in my life, and realize that, you know, that wasn't actually the thing that was the issue. But like, where do you get your answers from? You know, you can go to a naturopath. Like, it's becoming, people are a lot more mindful and conscious of it nowadays than they were, like I said, when I started this journey in 2009, for my physical well-being at least. And you can, you know, you can find somebody who has a better understanding of possibly the things that you're dealing with. But I think every person's body is going to be different. It has to do too with the types of medications that you've been on. I was on Adderall for 10 years of my life. You know, I took I was overprescribed antibiotics numerous times, you know, from different doctors, and including times when I was like, I feel terrible. I just want you to give me a Z-Pak because I have to go back to school or I have to go back to work, you know?
Yeah.
And again, that was stuff that was from an educational standpoint. I didn't know better. The doctor either didn't know better or, you know, didn't care, which I can't really blame them for that either. You know, it's just kind of like, yeah, like you said, you've got a job. You took 6 months of nutrition or 6 weeks, whatever it was. Like, the whole system has been so broken. And I think reclaiming your power is, again, this is what kind of led us to magic too. You know, it's like, what can you do to feel better? Well, I can eat healthy. I can take my own spiritual practice back into my own hands. You know, I can take my physical practice into my own hands. I don't have to do bench presses and curls like guys in high school were doing, where that was all you did. You did a repetition of lifting something heavy 10 times. I'm like, this is stupid. This doesn't seem super practical.
Which is why functional exercise has become a thing.
Right.
My biggest thing lately, and it cracks up Blue and Quest, is Bollywood dance videos. Like, I do that for fitness because it's crazy intense cardio. You're in goddess pose majority of the time.
Do some of this action.
Yeah, it's so good. It's all like Bhangra. It's amazing. And you just do a couple of those a day, maybe a yoga practice. I rarely get a full yoga practice here at home.
Right.
But if I get out of the house, then I'll get a nice one. And something that I think goes with all of that, both what you were saying about the Z-Pak and azithromycin and exercising in a way where you're listening to yourself, is listening. We numb so much. Not only do we want to fix, we want to numb. And my parents were really well intentioned when they kept giving me Dimetapp every day and aspirin every day. And I would list 7 to 8 medications on the what medications are you currently taking form, because I was on Flonase, Zyrtec, Singulair, Pulmicort, like could list all of them because they were trying to prevent me from feeling bad. They didn't want me to feel pain. They didn't want me to feel sick. They didn't want me to feel bad. But my body was screaming, I am not in a healthy state. I'm not in a healthy state. And instead we were just numbing that voice and saying, don't listen to her. Let's pretend we're fine. Let's just take this medication until we feel fine.
Yeah,
And
antidepressants. It's the same thing. You know, it's like, don't feel those emotions. Just kind of push them down. Let's not talk about that right now.
and I think that's another huge piece of integration that people leave out. That goes back to the very beginning. What we were talking about is feeling,
Mhm.
literally sitting in the feeling, not trying to push it away, not trying to fix it, not trying to do anything to remove it, but to actually move through it and
Yeah.
say, I'm going to fully experience. I'm choosing to fully experience. And every time my dad hears that I have a migraine or something, he says, "Why don't you take anything for it?" I'm like, because then I wouldn't know when it was done.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know that I was getting better. I wouldn't know that I had done the effective amount of magnesium and potassium to get myself back into a state of healthy hydration. Because clearly, nursing two babies and bleeding and exercising all at the same time is not sustainable for this physical body. So I'm trying to find the balance, and the migraine is an indicator that I have not hit that balance point yet. And if I
Right.
was just to numb it out with Excedrin, like I used to do when I was 21, 22, then I wouldn't be listening to my body and I would be using up my life chi. Like,
Yeah, and then you fuck
you
up
only
your
have a certain
liver.
amount of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a big part of this too is, and it's something that I definitely do with my clients as well, and incredibly grateful for Lindsay for doing for me, is giving permission. You know, it's like the goal is to get to a point where you don't need it from an outside source, but being able to give somebody permission to be okay with the things that have happened, with the things that they have done, and to just like, for you to accept it for someone else gives them the opportunity to accept it themselves, which is a big part of integration. Because if, you know, we've all done bad things in our life, and if we ignore it or we act like it didn't happen, or we kind of talked about it last week, like going to a priest and saying it, you're not necessarily experiencing it and allowing it to process through. You're just saying, yes, this thing happened, which is another thing that happened for me last week. This is something that I've thought about, that has, you know, happened from when I was a kid, and I thought about it kind of like, well, maybe I could apologize for it, you know, and but it's just like, it's still kind of there. I wasn't really thinking about it, and then literally naming it, verbalizing it, putting it out in the open, and letting somebody else hear it. You know, kind of mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I didn't really believe in the 12 steps. And I guess part of that is because I don't understand them completely. You know, making amends for the things that you've done wrong in life doesn't necessarily mean going and apologizing to the other person, because it might not be, that's not their cross to bear, you know, and it may not be that they're ready to deal with it. You bring something up that they're not ready to talk about, and it's kind of like, oh my God. So being able to give permission to somebody else is a big part of it. And being able to give permission to yourself too, to just like, to be okay with the fact that that happened. It's like, yeah, that's really hard. And maybe that happened. Maybe you did this because you were trying to integrate something that had happened to you, you know, realizing that a lot of the things that we do in our lives are because we're like trying to understand it. You know, it doesn't make sense. And when I was a kid, I would see my grandmother and my uncle and other family members, you know, drinking heavily. And I was like, I don't get that. And then I got to a certain age where I started smoking and I started drinking, and I'm like, I still don't really get it, but I guess this is what you do as an adult, you know? So I think permission is a huge part of it. Like being compassionate with yourself and with other people, which again is another one of the steps when you're
Wait,
when you're in your yoga practice.
clarify that for me. When you say permission, what are you giving the permission to do?
You're giving the permission to just feel it.
Oh,
Literally, it's like,
yeah.
it is okay for you to feel this. It's okay for you to talk about it. It's okay for you to look at it and address it. Like, that's really the first step, right? Like the whole idea of like, the first step in solving a problem is admitting you have it. Like, it's okay. You can talk about it. Anything that's super hard, you know. And like I said, it's been hijacked by a lot of religions, that you go and you sit in a dark box and you tell some dude through a screen that this is the stuff that you've done. And then he's completely disassociated with it. He's like, we'll go do 10 Hail Marys and a couple of Our Fathers, and, you know, everything's cool. Like, we'll call it square. Or, you know, if we're still in the age of indulgences, you know, give a couple extra $100 in the offering plate this Sunday, and we'll call it okay.
Oh my God. Ugh.
Yeah.
I mean, so
I love how you take
my
notes.
head
This is the first time
still,
I've
like,
actually watching you do this. Like, having you take notes as we talk about things is so fun.
I do this every time.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that keeps us on track, I think. And it helps with the show notes later, right? Because if I have to write like the synopsis, I can look back at what I've written. The 2 times that I didn't do it, I was like, I had to re-listen to the entire episode and take notes. We're almost at a close anyway, but I want to maybe like dive into this more deeply next time. But that first step that you're talking about of permission to really sit with it, permission to really feel and see and acknowledge whatever it is that you're experiencing goes so perfectly with the first step of alchemy. So alchemy only has 7 steps, not 12. It's a faster way to God.
You need to talk to Bill about that.
But it is the very first step. You have to add acid to really dense metal and then fire underneath it, calcination. So you literally light it on fire until the acid breaks down the most disgusting metal that is lead, right? It breaks down the poison. It breaks down the most dense matter that we are aware of, and it turns it into ash. It turns it into something that can dissolve in water. And then all of those particles broken down, the second step, dissolution, you go into the unconscious. You add the water to it. So you stir it in water until it's so completely dissolved that you can't tell the difference. Yeah, the water's a different color now, but you can't see the individual particles anymore. And you can start noticing that they themselves are elementally changing. It's no longer this dense matter, and you're able to start to filter it. And that's the third step, is the separation. So you filter out all of the various components by using different tools and techniques. And you're left with stuff that you can sort, and you can Marie Kondo that shit and say, does this bring me joy? No. Put it over there. Does this bring me joy? Yes. Keep it. And the way that they say it in alchemy is you literally get rid of anything that's unworthy of you, anything that is not worthy of your time, that's not a worthy substance to keep, and you're left with something that's ready to kind of start to solidify a little bit more. And it's this middle point. It's the 4th point. And I love it because it's like the chakras. Once you get to the heart chakra, once you've built that super strong, solid foundation, then you get to start doing the fun stuff. But you have to pause here and acknowledge that you're coming from a place of really good intentions, of compassion, of love, of acceptance. And you have to do it all to yourself first before you get to go up. And the spiritual bypassing is ignoring all of those first and just trying to go up without doing the work. And so I think Aya makes you, because you can't not focus on what's down there. But it is that alchemical process of putting, like, acid is the tough points in your life coming in and destroying the ego that is the lead. That is this thing that you think is a solid substance, that you think cannot be changed, that you think exists unto itself without being able to be affected. And then suddenly the acid's like, with the fire underneath going, oh, and the two together, like, are the ultimate transformative thing, because then at that point you can tap into the unconscious, which is the water, and it can't flow in until the ash is there. And so that really is the integration process of, first you have to be willing to break down everything you think you know, and then you get to dive in to all the rest of it, but you have to be able to feel it, right? Water is feeling and emotion just as much as it is unconscious intuition. And the two go hand in hand. You can't tap fully into one without the other. And then you get to start doing the work at that point, which is the separation. It's like you get to, because then you're aware. Then you get to say, I say literally too much. I say like too much. I say too much. I say too much. So yeah,
let's talk about alchemy next week. That sounds good.
And magic and mantra and how all of it plays together with the 4 5 building blocks, depending on which way you look at it. I like to say 4 building blocks because I feel like when the 4 elements come together, it creates the 5th.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well,
that can be something we can hash into too.
Yeah. Well, I think the 5th is the entities on the other side of the veil having the party. You know, that's like, hey, let's go hang out in this forum for a little while and enjoy chocolate and sex and, you know, being able to read, you know, that type of thing, being able to feel vibrations because you have dense matter. So
yeah, they're all those people having the party on the other side are like, I can't wait to incarnate again. It's been a while.
Yeah,
because they want this planet to up level itself. I think they keep having like roundtable conferences where they're like, well, this group seems a little ready, but the rest of this group is definitely not prime directive material yet.
Should we send down another Messiah? Let's try it.
Krishna's like, not again. Like, do I have to come back as a fish?
Yeah.
Oh man, I kept hearing Avalokiteshvara all day today, just like that name.
Mm-hmm.
Does he have a mantra?
I mean, that's compassion. That's got a lot of that. Hold on, let me move this book here.
Oh, that's Kuan Yin, huh?
Yeah, same thing. Let's just say Avalokiteshvara is I guess technically the male energetic. But let me see. I think we've got I think this book's got an Avilo. Avalokiteshvara, 187 and 189. I love how beat up and dog-eared this book is. Well, it's the Om Vajrasattva Hung, so we've got a little bit of that. 187. Yeah, there's the Namo Quan Shien Pusa.
Oh yeah.
Namo Quan Shien Pusa, which I can definitely do that one for this week. Kuan Yin is the Chinese feminine form of Avalokiteshvara. Among the Buddhist archetypes, Kuan Yin is a source of great compassion. The consciousness may expand, the knowledge grow, and the spiritual abilities manifest, but without compassion, these are little better than dust or straw. Jesus indicated this when he told us that without love, we have nothing. It is the same idea here. The Kuan Yin mantra infuses the consciousness envelope surrounding the earth with dynamic compassion, which manifests as grace and mercy, 2 of my favorite words. Chant the Kuan Yin mantra and know that you are contributing to the growth of dynamic compassion everywhere. Definitely get down on some of that action.
This is also the alchemy of as within, so without, right? The more that you concentrate on forgiving yourself, on loving yourself, on having compassion for yourself, then the more you're able to experience that with what is perceived as the other.
Right.
I thought of Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu, also Om Mani Padme Hum, also Ho'oponopono.
Yep.
Every single one. And I think I might do Ho'oponopono as the mala this week, just because then they get different ones depending on you or me. Or
I'm totally down with that. I will admit that I haven't been doing the 108. I do the breakdown and then I usually do like a 10-minute attunement for the mantra. And it's been a bit since I posted one up. I did a whole bunch of stuff at the beginning of May, and since we're getting close to June, it's time for me to get back into getting some material up. I do want to say, I know you had a big thing this weekend, and I talked about wanting to do stuff in secret, but Lindsay and I released our first single this past week, which I'm super proud of. Our friend Rob Ricardo helped us record it last February when he was in town, and it was finally time for us to let it go. So if it's posted on my Patreon for any subscribers, anybody who's got it, or you can find it on YouTube, you can find it on Spotify, you can find it on iTunes. The song is called Unveiled, and super proud of it. Just means a lot to both of us, and I'm glad to have it out there and be sharing it with people. So
it's so exciting. You always talk about recording. Now people get to finally hear you.
Exactly. Yeah. Go enjoy me plucking the guitar and Lindsay's voice, and I do a little bit of harmony and singing at the back end of it. So
Yeah, we were listening to it, and the boys were like, "Who is that?" I'm like, "You know them." They're like, "Can we listen to Lion King?" I'm like, sure, after this.
Of course, always.
So silly. Okay, so yeah, people want to find you. Your Patreon, Jeremy Renta.
Yep, and you can find me on.
Well.
It's Jeremy Renta. Yeah, Voice Hands Heart is kind of on a pause right now, and I'm not super integrating a lot of this stuff with that Instagram as well. So Jeremy Renta everywhere. RENTA.
And Witch Goddess Mama for me, amysolara.com. Witch Goddess Mama on Instagram, if you click the link in bio, has all the links for astrology readings, tarot readings, Akashic readings, Patreon page, retreat sign up. We are going to Tulum again in January. It's still happening, and I'm having dreams about it, so it's definitely happening. And yeah, I think it's going to be really wonderful to get out of all of this mess come the beginning of 2021. Literally going back to the Maya. So that'll be fun. Yeah. And what week is this? Full moon ceremonies coming up. Literally, like every 2 weeks, it changes you to start practicing that frequently, because I used to only do new moon.
I kind of wanted to talk about that too. I guess we can probably dip into it next week for fall, but like it has been really interesting for me too, since my practice has been so much more steady with the quarantine. Like I know that I've read in a lot of places that the best time to do practice, at least outside, is like from new moon to full, and then from full moon to new, you want to stay out. You don't want to go outside. You don't necessarily want to do your practice outside, because the darker energies are kind of coming in and they can be a lot more present. And I have felt it since I've been working so much more in the light. When the shadow has come, it has been thick. So yeah, it's that's something I would kind of like to discuss with you too, just when it comes to what your practice is, if it changes when when the moon is waning.
Yeah, let's do that next week, because that
Okay.
moon cycles and alchemy actually work really well together.
Okay, cool.
Also, I hear screaming children. If you can't hear them, great, because that means
I can.
Oh, they're having fun, at least. Those are happy.
That's good.
Happy screams. All right, let me stop the recording. Thank you all.